to Law PowerPoint, the finish out of this lecture. Get the volume control down to where we want it to be. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to look a little bit at how bills become laws. And that's the tail end of the PowerPoint that we've already started in class. And so that's where we're going with this. All right, let me find it on here. But this discussion has to start with committees. And the thing about the legislative branch is that the vast majority of work is done in committee. And so there are different types of committees, there are different roles that the committees take, and you have to keep in mind you've got these huge bodies of people, 435 members of the House and 100 senators, and so to get things accomplished, it's very important that they work in small pieces. And so they form what we call committees. And you know, it says at the bottom here, but I think it's worth mentioning, every representative is assigned to 2 committees and then 4 subcommittees. And then the senators get 3 committee assignments and 7 subcommittees. A lot of this has to do with just the sheer numbers being different. The 100, the responsibility has to be spread out a little more. But there are different types of committees, and knowing how each of them function is an important piece. And so, first of all, we have standing committees, and there's a chart in your textbook that you could take a look at. These are defined and determined by topic. There's Budget Committee, Finance Committee, Judiciary, Ways and Means, different things like that. And all those committees, they're different. If you're a member of a standing committee, it's only your house. So their senators are in their own standing committees, and then House members are in their own. And every bill that is put forth before Congress is assigned to one of the standing committees. Once it gets into standing committee, it gets broken into typically some subcommittees within that committee. And so those subcommittees will hold investigations, determine what needs to be found, and then they'll report back. So that's your standing committee role, and we'll get into a little bit more detail here in a minute. They also have what we call joint committees, and these are shared membership. So the House and Senate, there are members of both branches or both houses in these committees, and these are some of the more general committees. The Library of Congress, there's a joint committee on the Library of Congress. There's the franking privilege issue that gets dealt with, and that's a joint committee. These aren't quite as powerful. They sort of are task-oriented for the most part, and so those are joint committees. Conference committees are extremely powerful, and these are a little unique in that oftentimes a bill will get passed through the House. At the same time, similar legislation is passed through the Senate. And so you have 2 versions of the same bill. And the conference committees are members of both groups getting together and compromising, trying to determine which is the best way to go. And so conference committees handle that responsibility. And then finally we have select committees. Typically these are done for some specific purpose or reason. Maybe there's a specific budgetary issue. The super committee that we had recently falls into this category. It's a select committee. Most commonly select committees are one house or the other. The super committee happen to have both. So you know, as far as that goes. We've already talked about assignments, so we will move on from there. Committees also have a role in performing oversight. So once a bill is passed, oftentimes it's you know, the legislative branch's job is to pass law. The executive branch's job is to execute it. But if for some reason the president isn't upholding, or the executive branch isn't upholding their responsibility, it is possible that the Congress or Senate could step in and say, look, you guys aren't doing what you're supposed to do. This is what the rule is. And so they perform some oversight as well. And that committee that initially dealt with the bill would be the ones that would deal with the oversight. Now, we have committee chairpersons, and those are done mainly on seniority, but it used to always be seniority. So the most senior member that had been, regardless of political party. Now, it's the senior member of the party in power. And so that majority party caucus would choose the chairpersons. We saw this in our simulation that we did. The other thing that's come up, and this is a new thing, relatively new, is that you get other caucuses, groups of people that band together under some ideology. And so this is sort of a new thing. You know, you've got the Black Caucus, or pro-life, or pro-choice, or gun control, or the Tea Party, if we're going into most current times. And sometimes they come in conflict with the party leadership. So sometimes, and obviously there are Republicans and Democrats who are African American, and so they will. It's blended. It's not necessarily party oriented. Obviously, if it's a ideological issue, oftentimes it is party oriented. But you can cross over in these caucuses, and they have become somewhat important. It's a chance for people to build relationships, to push causes of similar issues, that type of thing. I write on here 6 types, and you know, just know that there's a lot of different types of caucuses. And we talk. I mentioned breakfast to regional because sometimes it literally is groups of people who get together for a meal, and it's just a chance for them to share ideas. And I mentioned regional because sometimes it's based on region. So you know, you can kind of see up here. It can be ideological, there can be breakfast types, regional types, there can be ones that are based on demographics, you know, different issues that are out there. And so you have a lot of different forms of caucuses. These, again, they're just chances for people to meet together. All right, then we got to pass a bill and make it a law. And we're doing this in our simulation, and so I want to just very quickly go through this. There is a chart in your textbook as well that kind of goes through the process. To be honest with you, the little cartoon that was put together by Schoolhouse Rock does a really good job of describing how bills become laws. So first and foremost, as a bill has to have a sponsor. The ideas can come from a variety of places. It could come from civic groups, individuals. It could come from you know, something, a wrong that is occurring in our country that a legislator jumps on board. The president can have ideas. But the reality of it is that a legislator, a senator, or a congressman has to introduce it. They will put it in the correct language, and then they get initiated into the House or Senate. In a given calendar year, well, and they say session, so really we're talking about 2 years, 10,000 bills might be introduced. So there's a lot, and most of them just get sort of steamrolled out of there, obviously, because we don't have 10,000 new laws each year, but there are a lot of legislative items put before Congress. There are different types of bills. There are public and private. Public are things that deal with the nation as a whole. Private bills deal with an individual or places. So maybe there's some particular issue in some particular part of the country that needs to be addressed, or a specific person that needs to be addressed, and so that would be an individual thing like a private bill. Most bills are public. We also have resolutions, and resolutions are a little different in that you know, they take on a different form. You have joint resolutions. These carry the force of law. They are typically regarding special needs or some type of temporary issue. Constitutional amendments tend to fall out of joint resolutions, and they are just a part of the way that Congress can go about doing business. But a joint resolution does, in fact, carry the force of law. A concurrent resolution doesn't carry the force of law, doesn't need the president's signature, and the House and Senate act jointly. Usually this is Congress making a statement about something. I mentioned at one point there was a concurrent resolution saying we were still in support of what was going on in Iraq. The more common one, I think, is the issue with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton had lied under oath, and he'd gone through an impeachment trial, and the legislative branch passed a concurrent resolution saying that we're censoring him for his actions. Now, it doesn't really mean anything in the sense of, you know, there's no practical repercussions, except that it was just publicly, we're telling you we disagree with what he did. You also have simple resolutions. Either body can adopt these, and sometimes these simple resolutions just become riders to bills, so they just get added to another bill that's there. Or it's just a simple resolution. It's one, no law, no force of law, but it's just passed by one house or the other. Oh, sorry about that. Too far there. On page 376 in your text, I believe that is where you see this continuum of where it describes this. Once the bill is titled, the Speaker or Senate Majority Leader will put a number on it, very similar to what we did yesterday. It gets assigned to these committees. And I mentioned this in our committee work when we were talking about it, but ultimately the subcommittees inside those committees will hold hearings, and they'll discuss it. They'll look at the monetary or budget issues that may take part in this. By the way, it's possible that legislation, based on how all-encompassing it is, could be assigned to more than one committee. And so that's sort of an important piece to this. But regardless, once it's there, the subcommittees will start hearing, they'll investigate, they'll find information. They get to decide, are they going to revise it, approve it, or kill it? So you sort of have these three choices. Not uncommon here to have the bills die. Maybe there's something about them that's not right, and so that'll be the end of it. Then it advances back to the committee as a group, the whole committee, and same thing. They may have more hearings, they may do more investigations, and they can revise it, approve it, or kill it. But this is where the time is spent on a bill. It can take years for committee work to be accomplished, and especially on intricate matters. So a lot of bills just get into committee and they never really even get worked on. And that's certainly something that it can occur as well. So this is where they're really looking at the nuts and bolts, the specifics and the semantics of what's going on with a particular piece of legislation. Now, here's where it gets even a little bit more interesting, because we're dealing with the House of Representatives and Senate being a little bit different as far as their rules are concerned. So in the House of Representatives, the Rules Committee has to schedule a rule to take action on a particular piece of legislation. This rule can be, anything relating to when they're going to debate, how long they're going to debate. Anyways, and you can see them listed here. So you could have a closed rule. It limits the number of debates, limits the number of amendments that can be allowed. But the Rules Committee is scheduling this and deciding which one they're going to go with. You could have an open rule where they will allow amendments. No matter what, they are going to restrict debate. There are too many people in there, so they will typically say, you have 10 people argue in favor of the bill, 10 and oppose, and then we'll have 5 counter rebuttals, and then 5 counter rebuttals, something like that. And then it'll be a set amount of time. You get 1.5 minutes, 3 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever it is, and that's very specifically created by that Rules Committee. You also have something called a discharge position, in which you can avoid the rules. The Speaker of the House can initiate that, and it's just a way to circumvent the system. Understand, you guys, there are a lot of ways that these things can be manipulated to either speed up or slow down legislation, and this is part of the political game that's played in the legislative branch, and a lot of it is rules of parliamentary procedure and things of that nature. But there's a lot of ways to really work this over. That's why you have a lot of lawyers, frankly, in the House and the Senate. Now, to actually vote, you have to suspend the rules. So they will suspend the rules, take a vote, and then in the House, they vote via electronic, because there's 435 members. So that's what they do there. In the Senate, the leadership schedules the debate. Amendments are open. It's a much more free-flowing idea here. And so the leadership themselves are the ones, the party leaders, the majority leaders, the committee chairs, those type of things. They're working this out. Also understand that a lot of times in the Senate, much of this work is done behind the scenes. It's not done on the floor of the Senate. So even though it's an open forum for debate, quite often they have worked out. Everyone knows where they're going to vote. There's only 100 of them. They know they're not going to change people's minds on the floor. What they're going to do is they're going to work on changing each other's minds behind the scenes, in a meeting, at lunch, at dinner, those types of things. All right, as we finish up here and continuing to talk a little bit about the Senate, understand that there's also some rules about floor action on both sides, and basically you have this idea in the House of the Committee of the Whole. And so the Committee of the Whole is 100 or more members, and they can debate bills. You can't add riders at that time, but you could have a debate with 100 or more, and that's called the Committee of the Whole. That's the terminology thing. You also have, when they do want to vote, you're going to need to have a quorum, which means at least 218, one more than half, have to be there in order to pass legislation. So that's how it works in the House. The Senate's going to do the same thing. They're going to have to vote. They would do a quorum call as well. And, you'd have to have 51 members in there. So that's part of the process. The Senate can add riders to legislation, and that's just something that they can do. The House, once that Committee of the Whole starts debate, they can't. So it's just a little bit, again, it's just these semantics of what's going on in the House and Senate. Now, when we get to this whole process of the bills have been passed, they've gone through the House, they've gone through the Senate, and they maybe don't match exactly, then we go to this conference committee, and I mentioned that conference committee. The conference committee would come in, they would look at the legislation, decide what's the best course of action, which side is better, is it minor details they have to change, and if so, they'll fix them, and then they'll resend that bill through the House and Senate. At that point, all they're doing is voting. So it's a roll call vote, and they vote on that bill. Whew. So we take a deep breath, and now the only problem is we've got to get the president to sign it. And the president has a choice. He can obviously sign the bill. It is possible for him to take no action on the bill. That's called pigeonholing. It's pretty rare, but basically it turns into a veto with no action. If there is a veto, then it takes 2/3 of the Senate and House to become a law. They have to override the veto with 2/3 vote. And the other thing that is worth noting is that the veto power is almost a bigger power from the threat of it. Threatening to veto almost becomes a bigger deal than vetoing itself, because it's hard to get half the people to agree, let alone 2/3. And if the president's going to veto it, then sometimes they won't take action. Sometimes it works in reverse. The party in control wants the United States general public to know that the president is causing this problem, and so often they will do it the other way. They will force the president to veto a bill. Anyways, it's political games. And then, a little note on here, it takes about 7 years for a non-monetary bill to become law, which is pretty crazy, really, when you think about it. So, some general rule that they want to pass, it's about a 7-year process on average to get a bill passed. Okay, now I promise you a little bit of a assignment here, and let's go to that. All right, so here is what I want you to do, and it's pretty straightforward, but I put it on here, and obviously you can pause this if you want to write it down. But basically, you're gonna pick a piece of legislation that has passed through the branch in the last 6 months, and I want you to give me the following 7 things. Sorry, I can't count. 1, who sponsored the bill? It could be multiple people. All right, so what senators, what congressmen were the ones who sponsored the bill? 2nd, what branch did the bill start in? I should have said House here, I suppose. What House does the bill start in? 3, what's the bill about? 2 to 3 sentences. Don't have to go crazy, just a couple sentences as to what the bill's general plan was. 4, what committee was assigned the bill? So what standing committee? Is there subcommittees involved? Who all was involved? 5, what was the vote on the bill in each house? So what did the Senate, what did the House vote? 6, when did the president sign the bill? And then finally, just a real quick, do you agree or disagree with it? 2 to 3 sentences on whether or not you agree with the bill and the legislation. All right? Pretty straightforward. You can just write those out on a separate sheet, type whatever you want to do. I don't necessarily care. It can certainly be in handwritten, and then you'll bring those with you to class. Okay? There you go. Thanks a lot, guys.